Most paranormal stories leave you with questions. These three leave you with something worse. The deeper these stories go, the harder they become to explain. Let's begin. Three weeks ago, my cat died in my arms. And I know how that sounds. I know. People lose pets every day. It's sad, it's hard, and then life goes on. But what happened in the hours before Solomon died, I cannot explain it. Not rationally, not even close. So let me start from the beginning. I'm not a spiritual person, never have been. I don't go to church. I don't read horoscopes. I don't believe in ghosts or signs from the universe. I'm the kind of person who needs evidence, who needs logic, who laughs, gently but still laughs, when someone says their dead grandmother visits them in dreams. I say all of this so you understand what I'm about to tell you is not something I want to believe. It's something I cannot stop believing, no matter how hard I try. His name was Solomon. I found him when he was just a kitten, crossing a dangerous stretch of country road outside of Ashford, Tennessee. I'd been driving home from work, radio on, not thinking about anything in particular, when I saw this tiny gray blur weaving between the lane lines. I hit the brakes, pulled over, opened my door, and he just jumped in, didn't hesitate, curled right into my lap, like he'd been waiting for me specifically, like he knew. That was 11 years ago. In those 11 years, Solomon was not just a pet. I know people say that about their animals, and sometimes it's just love talking, but this was different. We had our own language, actual sounds and responses that meant specific things. He knew my moods before I did. When I was sick, he was on my chest. When I was grieving, he was pressed against my side. When I laughed too loud, he'd give me this look, this very specific, very unimpressed look that I can still see perfectly when I close my eyes. He was mine, and I was his. And then one Monday morning, he was gone. I woke up, and Solomon wasn't in the bed, which, okay, sometimes happens, but when I called for him, he didn't come. And that never happened, ever. In 11 years, that cat came every single time I called his name, every single time. I searched the house first, every room, every closet, under every piece of furniture. Then I went outside. I walked the woods behind the property for hours. I checked the creek bank, the old equipment shed, the neighbors' yards on both sides. I got on my hands and knees and looked under the porch. I called out until my voice went hoarse. Nothing. By Tuesday, I had family and friends helping me search. My neighbor Marcus brought his truck so we could cover the back fields faster. My cousin drove 2 hours just to walk the property with me. I arranged to bring in search dogs, actual trained dogs, because I was not willing to give up. I was not willing to accept that he was just gone. But here's the thing that was quietly terrifying me. Underneath all the searching, I know that land, I know those woods, and I knew in my gut that if Solomon was out there, alive, injured, hiding, I would have found him. The dogs would have found him. Someone would have found something, and we found nothing. By Wednesday evening, people were starting to lose hope. I could see it on their faces. The careful way they chose their words around me. The way Marcus stopped suggesting new places to look and just started walking beside me in silence. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten much. My body hurt in that specific way it does when grief and exhaustion fuse into something that feels almost physical, like something pressing down on your chest. At dusk, I told everyone to go home and rest. They'd given so much of their time. I was grateful, but I wasn't done. I leashed up my dog, a big old shepherd mix named Ranger, and I decided to do one last walk, solo, just me and Ranger in the fading light. And that's when I saw him. I was maybe 50 yards from the creek when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, something on the far bank. I turned, and there was Solomon, sitting perfectly still on the creek bank, just watching me. My heart nearly stopped. I called his name, and he looked at me. I remember this so clearly. He looked at me in this strange, searching way, like he was checking to make sure it was really me. like he was verifying something, and then he bolted, just sprinted toward the house, fast as anything, disappearing into the shadows. I ran after him. I was calling his name. Ranger was pulling at the leash. I was running flat out through the dark, trying to follow this gray blur back toward the house, but I couldn't catch him. And here's where it gets strange. Here's where I need you to stay with me. The whole time I was running back, I felt this pull, not emotional, physical, like something tugging me toward the cellar, the old stone cellar at the side of the house, a place I had already searched, twice, 3 times maybe, a place I was certain was empty. I went down anyway. I started down the cellar steps in the dark, flashlight out, and before I even got to the bottom, he answered me. That sound, his sound, the specific little chirp he made when I called him, the one that was just ours, the one I had been listening for 3 days. It came from the corner of that cellar. He was there. He couldn't move. Solomon was lying on the cold stone floor, completely unable to use his back legs. I picked him up, and he started purring immediately, this deep, rumbling, desperate purr. And I just held him, and I was crying so hard I could barely see. The vet told us later it was a saddle thrombus, a massive blood clot that cuts off circulation to the hindquarters. It's brutal, it's fast, and it's almost always fatal. But here's what the vet also told me. There was no way, medically, physically, biologically, that Solomon could have run, not even a few steps, not even across a room. A cat experiencing a saddle thrombus cannot move its back legs, cannot sprint, cannot bolt across an open field and disappear into the dark, cannot do what I watched Solomon do at the creek bank. I sat with that for a long time in the waiting room while they assessed him. I kept replaying it, the way he looked at me, the way he seemed to be checking my face, the way I couldn't quite focus on his features, almost like looking at something slightly out of phase with the world around it. His eyes. Solomon had the most distinctive eyes I have ever seen on an animal, this particular shade of amber, with flecks of gold around the iris. People always commented on them. His eyes were the first thing anyone noticed about him. The thing by the creek had black eyes, completely, fully black, no amber, no gold, no iris at all that I could see, just black. I didn't fully register that in the moment. I was too flooded with relief, too desperate to follow him, but sitting in that waiting room, it came back to me, slowly, the way a wrong detail always eventually surfaces when the adrenaline wears off. His eyes were black. Solomon died 3 hours later. He purred from the moment I picked him up in that cellar until the very last second, until the clots reached his lungs and his brain, and he simply went still, quietly, in my arms. I've been trying to make sense of it ever since. Was it a trick of the light by the creek? Was my sleep-deprived, grief-soaked brain just manufacturing something? Was I so desperate to find him that I hallucinated? Maybe. I genuinely consider that possibility. But then I think about Ranger, my dog, my very rational, very unspiritual, not sleep-deprived dog who was on that leash beside me. And I remember the way Ranger behaved at the creek bank, not barking, not straining towards Solomon the way he normally would, just frozen, ears flat, not moving. Ranger was scared. Dogs don't get scared of hallucinations. I think about this a lot now, in the quiet hours of the night when the house feels too empty and I reach down toward the end of the bed, out of habit, and there's nothing there. I found Solomon at the beginning. He wandered into my open door and chose me on some empty stretch of highway, and I never really understood why. Maybe he just needed somewhere safe, or maybe he knew, even then, that when the time came, I would need to be found too. I think that's what he did at the creek. I think whatever Solomon was, or whatever part of him was still here in those final hours, I think he came to find me one last time, to make sure I'd look in the right place, to make sure I'd have those last 3 hours to say goodbye. I don't have another explanation. I've tried. He found me at the beginning, on a dangerous road when neither of us were looking for anything, and he found me again at the very end. I still don't fully understand what I saw that evening by the creek. I'm not sure I ever will. But I know what I felt when I walked down those cellar steps and heard that sound come out of the dark. I felt like I had been led there, and maybe that's enough. My grandfather was the kind of man who didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. He spent his whole life working with his hands, fixing things, caring for things, never asking for much in return. And when he got sick, really sick, the kind of sick that takes 4 long years to finish what it starts, the one thing he kept coming back to was that truck. A 2006 pickup, dark blue, bought it brand new and treated it like it was alive. 45,000 miles in 13 years. That tells you everything you need to know about the man. He drove it slow, he drove it careful, he kept it clean, not a scratch on the paint, not a crack in the dash, every oil change on time, every tire rotation logged. That truck was perfect, because he made sure it was perfect. And in those final weeks, when the words started coming harder, he made one thing absolutely clear. We were getting that truck. That was his wish. That was his goodbye. He passed in 2019, and for a while, none of us could even look at it without falling apart. But eventually, we started driving it, because that's what you do, right? You carry the person forward. You keep something of them alive in the everyday. My mother would run errands in it. I'd take it out on weekends. And every single time either of us got behind that wheel, it felt like he was still around somehow, sitting shotgun, not saying much, just there. That truck was the closest thing we had left to him. So when it happened, when someone rolled right into the back of it, it felt like losing a piece of him all over again. We were parked in a CVS drive-through line, a normal Tuesday afternoon, nothing special. My mother was at the wheel, I was in the passenger seat, and we were just waiting, talking. The kind of conversation you forget 5 minutes after you have it. And then a sound, not loud, just a dull, low crunch, metal on metal. The truck lurched forward slightly. We both went quiet. My mother looked in the rearview mirror first. I turned around, and there it was, a beat-up old Ford, its front bumper pressed right up against my grandfather's truck. We got out. The man behind the wheel was already opening his door before we even reached him, hands up, voice shaking. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I wasn't looking, and He was older, maybe mid-70s, thin in the way that means things have been hard for a long time. He had a hospital bracelet still on his wrist. His clothes were clean but worn, and his eyes had that specific kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep. He told us he'd just been discharged that morning, said he was looking for some paperwork on his passenger seat, something from the hospital, and he hadn't realized his foot slipped off the brake, hadn't realized the car was rolling until it was too late. He kept apologizing, over and over. He couldn't stop. When we exchanged insurance information, that's when it really hit us. The address he gave, the way he searched for the card in his wallet, the small details that you notice when you're really paying attention. This man wasn't doing well, not financially, not physically, not in any way that mattered. We thanked him. We told him we'd be in touch. We got back in the truck. Neither of us said anything for a full minute. Then my mother looked at the dent in the rearview camera display. It was bad, not devastating, but bad, right in the center of the rear bumper. Maybe $400 minimum to fix, and we didn't have that, not sitting around, not easily. But going after this man, this exhausted, unwell, clearly struggling man, it didn't sit right either. We drove home without deciding anything. That night, I fell asleep with it still unresolved, and then I dreamed. I don't dream often, not in any way I can hold on to the next morning, but this dream, I remember every detail of it, even now. I was in my grandfather's backyard, the one we all grew up in. Late afternoon light, the golden kind, the kind that makes everything look like a memory, even while you're in it. There was a cooler by the old lawn chair, birds somewhere, the smell of cut grass, and he was there, sitting in that chair, a beer in his hand, looking healthy, looking completely healthy, not the man I watched disappear over 4 years. The man from before all of that. Strong jaw, that half smirk he always had, like he knew something you didn't, but wasn't going to tell you. We talked. I don't remember everything. The kind of small talk that feels huge when you're doing it with someone you've been missing. How's your mother? How's work? You eating enough? And then he asked about the truck. I told him what happened. The drive-through, the old man, the dent, all of it. I probably talked too long about it, the way you do when you've been holding something and finally get to put it down. He listened, nodded slowly, took a sip of his beer, and then he smiled, just slightly, that smirk. You know, he said, it's just a truck. I woke up. Sunlight was already coming in through the curtains. I lay there for a minute, just still, trying to stay inside it a little longer, but it was already fading at the edges the way dreams do. I got up, made coffee, didn't say anything to my mother yet, wasn't sure how to, but she was already at the kitchen table when I came downstairs, and she had that look, the one where something has shifted, where a person has already made a decision and is just now figuring out how to say it out loud. She told me she wasn't going to file the claim. I asked her why. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "You're probably going to think this is silly, but last night I had a dream about your grandfather." I put my coffee cup down. She said he was in his backyard, sitting in his chair, a beer in his hand, looking completely healthy. They talked for a while, she said, and at some point she told him about the truck, and he smiled, and he said, "Don't worry about it, it's just a truck." We looked at each other across that kitchen table for a long moment, two of us, same dream, same backyard, same chair, same beer, same words. We never filed the claim. We never tried to contact the man, and the dent is still there. My mother says she won't fix it. She says every time she sees it in a parking lot or catches it in the rearview camera, she thinks of him, not of the accident, of him, sitting in that chair, healthy, smiling, telling her not to worry. Some people say grief does strange things to the mind, that when we lose someone, our brain keeps searching for them, finding them in places, manufacturing moments, just to feel close one more time. And maybe that's all it was. Two women who missed the same man, processing the same guilt, landing on the same answer. Or maybe he just really loved that truck, and he loved us more. And somewhere in whatever comes after all of this, he found a way to tell us both. That's the thing about the people who are really gone, the ones who really leave a mark. They don't just disappear, they stay in the small things, in the way the light hits a lawn chair at golden hour, in the smell of a cold beer on a warm afternoon, in a dent on a bumper that nobody ever fixed. And sometimes, if you're very still and very quiet, they tell you exactly what you need to hear. It's just a truck. I still feel him sometimes. Late at night, when the room gets quiet and the world finally stops moving, I feel the weight of him, the warmth, that coarse, wiry fur that I could recognize anywhere, even in the dark, even now, years after he's gone. And I know that sounds like something a grieving person says, something soft and a little embarrassing to admit out loud. But I need you to understand, this wasn't just a dog. Jesse was something else entirely, something that doesn't have a clean word for it in any language I know. This is his story, and honestly, it's mine too. It started in Morgan Hill, California. I was 9 years old, and my mother had said something to me that I genuinely could not believe. She told me I could pick one puppy out of 15. 15 tiny, squirming, ridiculous little creatures, all tumbling over each other in a giant laundry basket, like the universe had just decided to put all the good things in one place and dared me to choose. I had never been given a choice like that before, not really, and I walked up to that basket and I knew, the second I saw him, chow size, shepherd markings, husky fur, stocky little boy who looked like he had been designed by someone who couldn't decide on a breed and just said, "All of them, give him all of them." But he wasn't in the basket. He was in someone else's arms. A girl, around 19. Tattoos, piercings, clearly had already claimed him in her own mind. She looked at me the way people look at a 9-year-old who doesn't know how the world works yet, and she told me he was hers, that her mum was just inside the dentist's office and they were taking him home. I want you to picture this, a 9-year-old girl standing in a parking lot in California, staring down someone a decade older than her over a puppy. I told her she had my dog. I said it flat. I said it certain. The way you say something when you already know how the argument ends. We went back and forth, and then the dentist door opened. Her mother walked out, took one look at that puppy, and said absolutely not, no way, put it down. And before that girl could even process what was happening, I reached out and took him right out of her arms, looked her in the eye, smiled, and very politely thanked her for holding my dog for me. $15. We paid $15 for a super dog. Jesse knew over 85 commands. 85. He would do things that made strangers stop in the middle of whatever they were doing just to stare. He was the kind of dog that made people who claimed they didn't like dogs reconsider everything they thought they knew about themselves. But it wasn't the tricks. It was him. The way he'd look at you like he actually understood. Not the words, not the commands. You. Like he saw straight through all the noise and the pretending and just knew you. The real version of you. My mother and I shared him over the years. 2 years with me, 2 years with her, back and forth. Which sounds clean when you say it like that, but it never felt clean. Every handoff felt like a small loss. Every time I watched him go, some part of me stayed behind with him. January 2014. I was moving from New Mexico back to Washington to stay with my grandparents. We stopped in California along the way, and I had to give him to my mother. I remember standing there, holding him, knowing something I didn't have the words for yet. I just knew. The way you know certain things without being able to explain why. Something quiet and heavy sitting right in the center of your chest. I loved him as hard as I could in those last few minutes, said everything I needed to say in the way you say things to dogs, which is to say, without words, just your hands in their fur, your face against theirs, that specific kind of quiet that only exists between a person and an animal that has been with them long enough to know their whole life. And I left. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself I'd see him again. August, that same year, I was out at the lake with my grandmother, water everywhere, sunlight, one of those days that feels like it was designed to make you forget anything hard has ever happened. My phone went off. Something told me not to look yet. Not yet. Just one more minute of that. One more minute of the water and the light and not knowing. I don't know how long I waited, but eventually I looked, and just like that, Lake Day was over. The whole world went still and small and wrong all at once. Heart disease. It came fast, and it took him faster, and I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I want to be honest with you about what that does to a person. Some people will hear that and think, it's just a dog. People lose dogs. It happens. You move on. But here's the thing about loving something the way I loved Jesse. There is no category for it that makes it smaller or easier to carry. I treat my animals like my children, and I couldn't have children of my own. So when I say Jesse was everything, I mean it in a way that goes deeper than any word I know how to use. From 2014 into 2017, I was in the dark, really in it. Things were falling apart around me in ways I won't get into, and depression had moved in like it owned the place. My husband came into my life, and things slowly started finding their shape again, but the grief just sat there, patient, waiting. All I wanted was to see Jesse one more time. I would lie in bed at night and ask for it, out loud sometimes, quietly. I would ask him to come find me in my dreams, just once, just so I could see his face again and know he was okay, that wherever he was still him. Weeks passed, months, nothing. I started to wonder if that was just the deal, that some things leave and stay gone, that the wanting doesn't get answered, it just eventually gets quieter. I was wrong. One night, I don't know exactly when, late, the kind of late where the whole house breathes differently. I was asleep, but I was aware. If you've ever had that experience, you know exactly what I mean. That strange in-between place where your body is completely still, but some part of your mind is watching, present, awake behind your eyes, without being awake. My husband was beside me, close, right there. And then, between us, something settled in. Not a sound, not a shape I could see, but weight, warmth, and that fur. I would know that fur in complete darkness, at the bottom of the ocean, coarse and thick, and a little wild, exactly like him. He was there. I could feel his breathing, the rise and fall of him, the specific heaviness of a dog who has decided he's not moving, and the whole world can wait. And I didn't move. I didn't breathe wrong. I didn't open my eyes, because I knew, the second I broke it, he'd be gone. So I just lay there, in that dark, quiet, impossible moment, with my boy one more time. My skin was electric. My chest was so full, it almost hurt. I let myself feel every second of it, the weight of him, the warmth, the relief of it, which I don't think I can describe in a way that does it justice. The relief of knowing he found me, that he came when I asked. I don't know how long it lasted, but I know that when I finally woke up, something had shifted. Something that had been wound tight for 3 years, finally let go. Just a little, just enough. My mother always says that our dogs will lead us home, the ones who have gone before us, who have crossed over before we were ready to let them go. They wait, they find each other, and when it's time for the people who love them to make their way through, there's a familiar face on the other side, a tail wagging, a body pressed warm against your leg. She told me to tell our other animals to look for Jesse when they went, that he would know them, that he'd take them to the pack. I believe her. I don't say that the way people say things they hope are true. I say it the way I say things I know, the way I knew he was my dog in that parking lot when I was 9, the way I knew in January that it was the last time, the way I knew on the night he came back to find me that it was really him. Some things you just know. There's another dog in my future now, finally, after all this time, and I want that, I really do. I'm ready for it in a way I wasn't before. Ready to love something new and let it matter and not feel like it means I'm replacing him, because you can't replace something like Jesse. You just make more room, you expand, you carry the ones you've lost, and you make space for the ones still coming. But Jesse will always hold a piece of my heart that belongs to no one else. A big piece, a Jesse-shaped piece, unmistakable, irreplaceable. And wherever he is right now, I hope he knows that. I hope somehow, in whatever way dogs understand things, he feels it. That warmth I'm sending back across whatever space exists between here and there. I hope he visits again. I'll be ready. I'll keep the light on, and I'll know it's him. I always do.